Good morning, Excellencies, colleagues, and distinguished guests. Welcome to the United Nations Economic and Social Council Chamber. On behalf of New York City, it is a privilege to be inside this esteemed institution to engage on an issue of importance to all of us. I'm Penny Abiwardena, New York City's Commissioner for International Affairs. It is a pleasure and great honor to serve as Commissioner in our vibrant and multicultural city. Mayor Bill de Blasio and I are proud that New York City is home to the largest diplomatic community in the world. We have 114 consulates, 193 permanent missions, and of course the headquarters of the United Nations. I'm thrilled you are here with us today for the first Global Vision Urban Action Program of 2017. This is our signature program that translates the UN Sustainable Development Goals on a local level. Through this program, the Mayor's Office for International Affairs brings together experts and representatives from New York City and the international community to share information and forge innovative solutions on issues ranging from technology and gender equity to today's event on mental health for all. Global Vision Urban Action programming is predicated on the idea that while countries and cities share similar challenges, they more importantly also share solutions. It also showcases New York City's leadership through One NYC Mayor Bill de Blasio's development plan focused on growth, equity, sustainability, and resilience. At your seat, there is a booklet titled A City with Global Goals, which highlights the synergies between One NYC and the Global Sustainable Development Goals. Today's event, Mental Health for All Local Strategies, brings together UN leaders and New York City governments, as well as community leaders and practitioners, for a critical discussion about mental health. Please keep the conversation going online by tweeting at NYC First Lady, Global NYC, NYC Healthy, and using the hashtags ThriveNYC and NYC by SDG. And we had that moment because if it's not on Twitter, did it happen? So we are really hoping to keep this conversation going beyond this room, this esteemed room we are in right now. Thank you to our co-host, the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, particularly Dr. Gary Belkin's team, and the permanent mission of Palau, and ambassador and the leadership of Ambassador Caleb Otto. Thank you to our co-sponsors, the permanent missions of Australia, Belgium, Canada, Chile, Costa Rica, Liberia, Panama, Sri Lanka, as well as UNFPA, UN Women, and the World Health Organization. It is my great pleasure to have New York City's First Lady, Chirlane McCray, with us. Her strategic leadership and dedication to promoting mental health awareness and ending stigma has paved the way for reimagining how New York City approaches mental health. Today, you will hear about Thrive NYC, our city's roadmap that has changed the way we think and talk about mental health, and which is revolutionizing the way we deliver services to ensure that all New Yorkers can thrive. According to the World Health Organization, more than 450 million people globally suffer from mental illness. And these aren't just statistics from me. My father struggles with mental illness, as did his father. For years, he tried to manage his demons with alcohol, which unsurprisingly led to violence in our home. As a new immigrant to the United States, my mother struggled to give him the support he needed. The repercussions from inaccurate diagnosis, lack of access to services, and stigma within our family and community dramatically shaped my childhood. I know that my story is an all too familiar one. That's why I hope today's conversation not only shines a global and local spotlight on an issue that touches so many of us, but equips you with the new strategies and resources for you to take back to your communities. So again, thank you all for being here today for this very important discussion. It is now my pleasure to turn the floor over to First Lady Chirlane McCray. The First Lady is committed to ensuring that all New Yorkers receive the services they need to succeed and has worked to bring mental health issues to the forefront of the discussion and combat stigma. And I know on behalf of all New Yorkers, we are very grateful for her work and the work that her team has been leading. So let us please give her a very warm welcome, New York City's First Lady, Chirlane McCray.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. And Thank you, Penny. It's such an honor to address such a distinguished and, I would add, a good-looking crowd. I want to especially thank Penny for her introduction, but also for sharing part of her personal story, because it is when people have the courage to share such personal information about their struggles or experiences with mental health, it makes it easier for other people to also share their stories and helps us address the stigma which is so prevalent in our society. So thank you, Penny. I also want to thank all of you for allowing me to share a few thoughts about a topic I never get tired of talking about, which is, of course, mental health. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how this started. 2 years ago, I traveled throughout the 5 boroughs to talk with people about their mental health experiences. And wherever I went, I asked people, can you please raise your hands if you or someone you love has not ever been touched by mental illness or substance misuse, either directly or indirectly? And by now, I've probably asked that question thousands of times. And guess how many people have raised their hands? Not one. Not a single person has raised their hand. And that makes sense given that we know at any given moment, 1 in 5 Americans struggles with mental illness or substance misuse or both. And according to the World Health Organization, 1 in 4 people in the world will be affected by mental or neurological disorders at some time in their lives. Sadly, too many of these people suffer alone and in silence, and I know this all too well. When I was growing up, both of my parents suffered from depression, which of course affected my lives and the life of our whole family. And over the years, people who are close to me, members of my extended family, friends, and coworkers, have suffered from alcoholism, bipolar disorder, PTSD, schizophrenia, and other conditions, some treated and some not. I have experienced the emotional frustrations and anxiety of unexplained and erratic behaviors, and I know how suicide can haunt a family for years with questions, spoken and unspoken, that never go away and affect every member of that family quite dramatically. A few years ago, our own daughter was diagnosed with depression and anxiety, and it was so difficult to find the right providers for her. I mean, it was really tough. And I had to ask myself, if we're having this much difficulty finding the right help for her, what do other families do? Families who don't have the same kind of resources or network that we do. Now, our daughter has since graduated from college and is quite fine now, but I can never forget how tough it was, how tough that journey and experience was. So when Bill became mayor and I became First Lady, I knew that we had to do everything that we could to help those who are suffering. And so that is how Thrive was born. Because of my personal experience, because of the passion that I have for this issue, and because of the extraordinary team that we have, real brains in this, and you'll hear from some of them later on today. Thrive NYC is our roadmap to begin changing the way people think about mental health, to end the stigma attached to mental illness, and to make treatment more accessible. We want more people to know that mental illness and substance misuse are treatable. And I want people to think about mental health the way they think about physical health. Because we simply cannot afford to continue looking the other way when people are suffering. So I'd like to share a brief video that will give you a little sense of what we're doing. No, we're missing our sound. The sound broke, so we're going to have to go without it? Okay, my apologies. As you can see, we're having some technical difficulties. Technology is not going to save us. And so, I'm pleased to say that, well, let me tell you, this video, this animation is really wonderful, and a wonderful and graphic way to show people how physical health and mental health are treated so differently, that someone can be suffering from a broken leg or asthma or diabetes, and no one says, just snap out of it, pull yourself together. When someone has depression or anxiety or any other mental illness, it's just looked at in such a dramatically different way. And this video very graphically shows that it is online, and we'll make sure that you get the link to it afterwards. But we'd like to share it. I like to share it wherever I go, wherever I talk, because when people see this visual, it makes it so much more clear to them just how to look at things a little differently. That which is invisible becomes much more understandable to them when they see the cartoon. So I'm very pleased to say that since Thrive NYC launched, we have made tremendous progress. Every single one of our schools now has some form of mental health support. We are also implementing new programs to train teachers to help our young people understand their emotions and build emotional resilience. We've created a mental health service corps, which will deploy 400 mental health care professionals where the city needs them most, in places like primary care practices, substance misuse programs, and health clinics. And we have set up a system to screen and treat 80% of new moms and pregnant women in the city for maternal depression, which is common and treatable. And I just have to say that we found that too many pregnant women and new mothers don't get the mental health care that they need, because they don't know that these negative feelings that they have a clinical cause. And they really fear being judged. There's such a stigma around for women being thought of as a bad mother. No one wants to be a bad mother, and this is something that we can really do something about, and it doesn't cost a lot of money. It's just connecting to these women when they, before they give birth, after they give birth, and asking them how they feel. The attention always goes to the baby, but we have to think about the mother as well. So those are just three of the 54 initiatives that are part of our mental health roadmap. And as you can see, we are determined to change the culture around mental health in our city. Although we're very proud of the progress that we've made, we know that New York City is not the only place with a lack of mental health services. Mental illness has no boundaries, and it does not discriminate. So all of you sitting here now have a very important decision to make. Will you sit on the sidelines, or will you join us and fight? I know that taking on an issue like mental illness may seem daunting, but there are some simple yet powerful steps you can take in your own communities to help those who are suffering. So I'm going to tell you about two approaches that we think can work anywhere in the world. You'll hear more details from these fantastic panelists, but I want to make sure that you understand that this work that they're going to talk about can be done anywhere, even if you don't have much money. The first approach is called task shifting, which means changing the assumptions about who can provide some kinds of mental health service. And I'm talking about members of the clergy, teachers, but also coworkers and peers and family members. They can be trained to recognize the signs and symptoms of mental illness and substance misuse and provide some relief or get people to professional care. The truth is, we just don't have the mental health workforce we need, especially in high-need communities. And I know that is true not just in our city, but in many of your countries as well. In many communities, for so many people, it's just virtually impossible to find someone, a mental health professional that is, who speaks their language, someone who understands the culture, someone people can trust. Finding that someone can make all the difference in the world. And I saw this for myself at a middle school in the Bronx, right here in New York, where I met a licensed clinical social worker named Yahaira, who grew up in El Salvador. One of the students Yahaira worked with was a young woman of Mexican descent, who I'm going to call Teresa. Teresa grew up in an abusive household, and that abuse left some very deep emotional scars. She began harming herself and had to be hospitalized multiple times. Fortunately, help was close at hand. Teresa's teachers were on the ball and referred her to Yahaira. No one else had been able to break through to Teresa. But Yahaira was sensitive to Teresa's history and culture, and that understanding led to trust. Eventually, Teresa began to work through her trauma. And when Teresa moved on from middle school, 118, she didn't just graduate, she graduated with honors. And this was a young woman who everyone had given up on. They thought no one was be able to penetrate that shield she had built from those years of abuse that she had suffered. Now, we need many more Yahairas, and they don't all need to be licensed clinical social workers. And that's where peers, teachers, community workers, and others come in. And we have a program called Connections to Care that is one of those Thrive programs that is helping to close the gap. And the program reflects what we always hear from people about how and where they prefer to get help. People like to get services where they live, where they go to school, or where they worship. And so we are working with community organizations that already provide a variety of social services to communities in their neighborhoods. Each community organization that is part of Connections to Care has a behavioral health partner to train and mentor staff from the community-based organizations that they're working with. That way, the staff at the community-based organization gains skills, more skills, and the organization has better outcomes for the other services that they're offering because people are getting better support. After all, how can you learn? How can you take care of your children if you're suffering from a mental illness? So if a mom who is suffering from undiagnosed depression comes in to sign up her child for daycare, the community-based organization staffer will be able to see the signs and the symptoms of that depression and lead the mother to treatment. Through Connections to Care, we plan to reach nearly 50,000 New Yorkers over 5 years, which I think is just very exciting. If we can train ordinary people to help those in their lives who suffer with mental health challenges, it will help our communities tremendously. And this approach is one that is possible for all of you to do or take in all of your communities. Now, we also know that one of the biggest obstacles to getting care is overcoming the stigma attached to mental illness. It is a difficult hurdle, but not impossible to overcome. In New York City, we've turned to our faith leaders for help. Last May, we held a weekend of faith for mental health. And we're excited to hold another one this year. Over a course of 3 days, 1,000 houses of worship representing 250,000 New Yorkers began an open and honest conversation about mental health. I visited a mosque. I visited a synagogue. I visited a Catholic church, a Baptist church, an interdenominational church, and 2 Seventh-day Adventist churches. I heard Spanish, I heard Hebrew, I heard Arabic, and I heard a whole lot of amens. But no matter where I went, no matter where I was, I felt resolve. On that weekend, we really came together and made a promise to each other to work as one to create a city where every New Yorker can thrive. There was no budget line for that, just a lot of coordination with our faith communities. And you can do that too. Since you're going to hear more about these initiatives, I'm going to close now by saying that mental illness and substance misuse are real hardship multipliers. It makes it more difficult for people to work, to get an education, maintain relationships, and live healthy, productive lives. But this is a difficulty that can be overcome. And I thank you all for allowing me to share what is a very personal passion for me, but a challenge for us all. Let's get to work. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlene. And we are going to have a follow-up email with everyone, and so we'll ensure that that video is in that email, so you have it. Now it is my honor to welcome Ambassador Williams to join us. She is a special advisor to the President of the General Assembly on Sustainable Development Goals. Ambassador?
Good morning. Excellency Ambassador Caleb Otto, Permanent Representative of Palau to the United Nations, and all other permanent representatives and diplomats to the United Nations. First Lady of the City of New York, Charlene McRae, Commissioner of International Affairs for the City of New York, Penny Abewardena, and you would stumble on that one. Ladies and gentlemen, I join with other colleagues in extending a warm welcome to you to the United Nations today, as together we explore our ability to thrive as healthy human beings in a healthy planet, which is the essence of the Sustainable Development Goals. I'm delighted to be here, flying in from London last night so as not to miss being with you all at this important gathering. And I'm here because the President of the 71st session of the United Nations General Assembly, His Excellency Peter Thompson, regrets that he cannot be here and has tasked me to be his representative. This sending me is his local strategy so as not to disturb your mental health. We have abandoned you. For whatever it was worth, he did not abandon you, and here I am. Now, the push for maintaining momentum on the Sustainable Development Goals is the main policy framework and the diplomatic action priority of President Thompson. The 17 goals will be where we will all push together over the next 15 years, and his one-year presidency is taking on that push until September of this year. And then we will pass the baton on. I congratulate the First Lady for founding Thrive New York City, and I congratulate you for having this conversation here at the United Nations. I don't believe this is your first year, but I congratulate you also for, in practice, taking a global vision on mental health for all and making it accessible to people through local strategies such as Thrive New York City. That, again, is the strategy for success of the SDGs. Local ownership, local action. All action, in fact, starts with health. With good health for good action. That's the key. Sustainable Development Goal number 3 on health and well-being has 2 specific targets that address mental health. Goal number 4 says that we must, and I quote, promote mental health and well-being. And goal 3.5 says, and I quote, we must strengthen the prevention and treatment of substance abuse, including narcotic drug abuse and harmful use of alcohol. This is in the Sustainable Development Goals. So New York, you're on target. We all know that the SDGs are indivisible. One cannot be achieved without impact, positive impact we prefer, on some or all of the other goals. For example, education has the impact of providing skills, knowledge, attitudes, and most of all, values. And in this way, we can help in changing consumption and production patterns and behavior. We can change the attitudes regarding mental health, for example, through adequate and appropriate education and awareness. This indivisibility underscores the comprehensiveness of the goals and the potential for individual and full achievement of them all. Let me just quickly then say some of our efforts to date that we have had in the office of the President. And for those of you who might be new to this, our office is right next door. And in his wisdom, President Thompson, who comes from the Fiji in the Pacific, has assembled a team of between 10 and 12 of us, because sometimes we take from other teams 1 or 2 communications persons. But we are a big team of diplomats, professionals, simply dedicated in the term of his presidency to the promotion of the Sustainable Development Goals. You've got us for another 7 months or so, so please feel free to call on us. Here is some of what we've been doing. Some of our efforts have included, first of all, I think in many ways, his signature action to raise awareness of the goals, just to raise awareness that this is a master plan that we have negotiated for at least 2 years, in perhaps longer, depending on how we look at it. And we have agreed on it, and all 193 countries have agreed that they wish to pursue that for 15 years to change the world that we live in and to change the people as we live in this changed world. So President Thompson has sent a letter to all heads of government and heads of state, urging them to support the teaching of the SDGs. And from my conversations in London yesterday with ministers, about 60 or 70 of them were there at this meeting in London. The vast majority of them have taken on board this push from the office here. And in fact, they're asking us for more support, particularly for their children. And I might want to leave this agenda with you, Commissioner, that what you are doing in Thrive, New York City is really important. The Minister of Education from Sudan, Libya, Iraq, Nicaragua, some of these countries who were in conflict or who are in conflict have said to me, we've got children who are either not in school or not doing well in school. So I think UNICEF has been involved in this, I know, over the years, but many of our initiatives here can assist the governments and the peoples and particularly the children in being healthy so that they can settle down in school and access tools for their future. Part of our awareness campaign has been to pin you to the SDGs. So if you see one of us going around, Sergio is there. I hope you're not tweeting yet. That's the craze now. Look for one of these, because people will come up to you and ask you, oh, what is this? This is the emblem of the Sustainable Development Goals. We're pinning you to the SDGs and pinning the SDGs to you so that you will be an envoy, you will be an advocate over the next 15 years and pass it on to your children and their friends in school. We have some with us, so see us afterwards. Our second initiative is to participate in the World Innovation Summit on Health. This was held in Doha, Qatar in November of last year. 1,400 health professionals gathered there to look at a report on healthy populations. To the finding of the report, one of its findings, that the health of a population depends on a wide range of factors. The doctors in the room, health professionals will agree with that. That the health of a population depends on a wide range of factors. We called for empowering people, all people at all levels, as a support for their mental health and thus their ability to maintain their health rather than simply focus on curing their illnesses. So the empowerment of people in whatever manner is an important contribution to mental health. This is part of our message. And our third activity has been to participate here with the World Health Organization on a Universal Health Coverage Day on December 12th. Again, this office supports the raising of awareness of the need for universal health care and universal health care coverage. And setting aside a special day for celebrating that is of importance to us. And lastly, let me just mention, yesterday we addressed sustaining peace, sustaining development. I know the colleagues from Sweden and others were key co-sponsors. Again, if we take some part of yesterday's meeting away with us, peace in the home, peace in the community, peace in the country, and peace in the whole world contribute to mental and wider social stability and allows us to engage in development, sustainable development. Peace is an input for and a feature of sustainability. Peace and sustainability, such as a good job in turn is a key element of good mental health. Try being unemployed. Yeah. So we believe we are working in the right direction, and we are so grateful to have a chance to be engaged in this work with the city. It helps our mental health, it certainly helps mine, to be employed, but also to be doing something that I value and that I believe contributes to others. To work together to make the SDGs become a reality, we encourage all of us to do that. And we promise to you that we'll continue with our engagements. Excellencies, we applaud the work of the City of New York in raising awareness and to get New Yorkers to the help that they need. That's very important in a city with millions, and I know there are many small islanders and others who come from cultures that hide mental health. Worldwide, we need to break down the stigma of mental health as a shameful punishment for sins of family or sins of individuals, as it is in some cultures such as mine. And we need then to support all to convey the importance of healthy attention to good and early mental health as a good in itself and as a conduit to living a life worth living. New York City is leading in addressing the nexus of mental health and homelessness, often born from poverty. And we applaud you and invite you to take this to other places in a partnership arrangement under SDG number 17. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Williams. Now it is my pleasure to invite Ambassador Caleb Otto. He is the permanent representative to Palau and our very key partner to this important event today. So, Ambassador, thank you again for your partnership.
Thank you, Commissioner, and good morning, everybody. What a thrill it is to be here with everybody and to witness the actual implementation of the 2030 Agenda. What a thrill to have involved in partnership with the most exciting city in the world. So it is truly unprecedented, to use the term that is very popular these days. On behalf of the co-sponsors, the City of New York, and on behalf of my colleagues, co-sponsors from Australia, Belgium, Canada, Chile, Costa Rica, Panama, Sri Lanka, Liberia, and our partner agencies at the UN, the UNFPA, WHO, and UN Women. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming today, and thank you very much to New York City for this partnership. We want to thank Dr. Williams for being with us this morning, having just flown in from London, and to share with us these inspiring words about moving forward. And finally, we want to acknowledge and thank the panelists for sharing with us this morning some great words of inspiration and the way we move forward. We're sort of running a little bit late, so I'll just be very brief. I think you would rather be hearing from the panelists and having an interactions rather than hear from me. Allow me just to share with you why this issue of mental health is very important to me. I too, like the First Lady, has experienced in my family mental illness. Palau, being pristine and being a paradise, actually has one thing that we also want to share with the world. We have one of the two communities in the whole world that has the highest rate of schizophrenia. And in my own family, my mother's younger sister had 2 children with schizophrenia, and my mother's brother had a child with schizophrenia. I treated some of them, and I treated many who were had mental illness in Palau. And so this was very close to me. When I was practicing, I decided that we need to do more work with regards to two things. One about the stigma, and one about understanding that mental illness is the same thing. It's an illness of the body, just like diabetes and hypertension, and we need not be ashamed of. So those are some of the reasons why it's been very close to me. So when I came to the UN, as a physician, of course, we're involved with oceans and climate change, but one of the things that was passionate for my work is about mental health and about health. So when we did the SDGs, the 16 goals, we came to the goal of health, number 3, and we said, well, the goal of health just talks about health more or less in general and about this physical illness again. Very little about mental health. So we worked very hard. I want to acknowledge our partner, Dr. Kuryansky, and the Association of Psychologists, and many member states. I want to acknowledge them to put in goal number 3 to promote mental health and well-being. And we are very happy that they got into the goal. So thank you very much to member states. I want to congratulate the New York City for their vision and their involvement in the implementation of 2030 Agenda. This is a great book. It's on your desk. Take a look at it. If you go back and look at it, they have integrated the 17 goals into 4 visions. Their vision for the community that is growing and thriving. Their vision for a community that is just and equitable. Their vision for a community that is sustainable, and their vision for a community that is resilient. So they've taken the 17 goals and adapted them into New York City into these 4 visions, and thank you very much for doing that. As I went over this, I was thinking, okay, well, this is very nice, but the way I look at the human being has 3 components to be a person. You have the physical body, and you have the mental aptitude, and then you have the spiritual, you have the soul. And very often we have put a lot of investment into the physical and very little investment into the mental and almost none into the spiritual. Because we think in our work at the United Nations anyway, that this belongs to the church, belongs to the psychologist, belongs to other people. So I commend New York City for having put these things together in a way that I think makes sense in looking at the community. So I was going over this, I just wanted to share one more thing before I finish. And this comes from yesterday, listening to the sustainable peace and sustainable development remarks from all the ministers in the world. And what came out of it was very interesting in that you cannot have sustainable development unless you have peace. And we just heard from Dr. Decima this morning that peace is not just about conflict in Syria and conflict in other areas, but peace within the communities where we are. So we're going to be hearing, I think, some of that from our panelists. But then I thought about this a little bit more, and a thought came to me about David Thoreau, the great American poet, who said, mass of men, I think this is, my friend said, you shouldn't say men, it should be more politically correct than mass of people. But quotation says, the mass of men leading lives of quiet desperation, with going to the graves with songs with them. And I was thinking, how unfortunate that so many people walk around with desperation and we don't know about them because they're in a quiet place in their mind. And how unfortunate that the universal language of song very often goes to the grave with people in quiet desperation and has not been released, has not been shared, has not inspired anybody. So today, I think if there's anything that I would like to add into this wonderful roadmap, is just to say, think about the other components of the human being, and think about the emotional and the spiritual, into and try to put them all together. David Thoreau also said, the only thing that's worth investing in is goodness. It's one that lasts. So as we go about our way and as we go to implement the 2030 agenda again, think about the many people around us. And one of the things that I heard yesterday that I thought was a great word was, you think about, even in here, it talk about the increasing Wi-Fi availability in the world. So like 6 miles away from home or six kilometers away from home, you have a Wi-Fi. So more hotspots available for you. And what I heard yesterday was hope spots. And I wonder if we can just take this and increase more hope spots in the world and where we are. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Now it is my pleasure to invite my colleague from New York City, Deputy Mayor Richard Beery, who is the Deputy Mayor for Strategic Policy Initiatives and is tasked with implementing and spearheading Thrive NYC. It is an honor to have you here.
Good afternoon, ambassadors, colleagues, and friends, old and new. Truly my pleasure to be with you here today. I'd also like to thank, of course, my colleague, Penny Abiwardena, as well as the First Lady of New York City, Chirlane McCray, and Ambassadors Williams and Otto, for all of your vision, all of your leadership, and for all of you sharing your stories. I'm here to lead into our panel. We have an amazing panel discussing Thrive NYC, our plan to change the way we approach mental health and mental well-being here in New York City. We understand that mental health impacts literally everything. It affects the ability of our students in New York City to learn, as we know that over a quarter of our students report feeling sad and hopeless regularly every day. We know it affects our physical health, as in the US, the average life expectancy of people with mental illness is approximately 8 years less, 8 years fewer than those without. We know it impacts public safety. Over 40% of the people incarcerated on Rikers Island have mental illness. And we know it impacts our economy. We estimate $14 billion with a B in annual productivity losses each year tied to depression, anxiety, and substance misuse. So it truly affects the ability of our city to live and to thrive. So we know that we are facing a public health crisis when it comes to mental health. And with Thrive NYC, we are, for the first time, taking a comprehensive public health approach to that crisis. So just over a year ago, we launched our roadmap to mental health for all, 54 initiatives, led not only by the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, but also by a lot of agencies that we would normally think about as public health or mental health agencies, but who are nonetheless on the front lines of mental well-being. Agencies like the Department for the Aging, the Department of Probation, Veteran Services, Corrections, the Police Department, the Education Department, all of these agencies that every day are engaging with New Yorkers. So we're about a year into it, a little over a year into it. We've made extraordinary progress so far. We're biased, but we think so. We've launched 80% of the initiatives originally outlined in the roadmap. We are working on closing treatment gaps by expanding services, bringing them closer to people in the neighborhoods where they live and work. We are working on changing the culture around mental illness. So many of us today have talked about stigma. So we're working on educating New Yorkers, making it easier for them to connect to the services they need. And we're working with local communities, really building on the expertise and the resources and the knowledge that exist in our local communities, especially important in a city as diverse as New York City. So we're going to hear from the panel in a moment about that work. But before we do, I just want to give you a brief perspective about what I think has allowed us to be so successful relatively quickly in New York City. And really it comes down to leadership. To change the way that any city approaches this work, everyone needs to understand that the leadership of the city is committed to change. And that starts at the top. And for us, it really started with First Lady Chirlane McCray. Her willingness to speak passionately about the challenges we're facing, the challenges she faced in her own family, And also, as she discussed briefly, her willingness to go out into the community and talk to thousands of New Yorkers about her experience with mental illness. That led to our roadmap, and it led to Mayor Bill de Blasio's $850 million commitment to Thrive NYC. So first and foremost, we cannot be here without the leadership of our mayor and our first lady and their decision that enough was enough. That leadership brings us to the second reason for our success: partnership and collaboration. Thrive NYC has really required city agencies to collaborate in new and different ways, to open their practices to scrutiny, and to change the way they do business. Just an example, the health department and the education department are collaborating on so many different transformative initiatives, from social and emotional learning for our youngest kids, our pre-kindergartners, to a vast expansion of mental health services in our schools. This willingness to work together has been key, and again, it's unleashed by the mayor and the first lady giving us permission to work together and to tackle these challenges together. It's a spirit that extends to our community partners, all the hospitals and the insurance companies and the community-based organizations and the advocates, all of whom have to be willing to work together to make deep investments, to change the way they do business. And again, organizations are not going to be willing to make those investments and to make those changes unless they understand that the leadership from the city is going to be persistent, unless they understand that this is not just the flavor of the day, but this really represents a fundamental change. By us being willing to make that change, we empower all the folks in the community who actually have to deliver these services. We empower them to make the changes they need. And finally, a culture of accountability. Because at the heart of this is a willingness to always see what is working, what's not working, to be transparent about that, to share not only our successes, but also our failures. By doing so, we create a culture of continuous improvement, which is what really at its heart allows us to continue to work better and do better. We have seen time and time again in New York City, and I know it's true anywhere, that you can move mountains when you start with leadership. We can truly give every New Yorker the opportunity to thrive. So I want to thank the UN again for giving us this opportunity to share what we've learned so far, to give us a chance to show off how our work advances the goals, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and for giving us this chance to learn from each other. So with that, I am so pleased to turn over to this remarkable panel, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague and friend, the Executive Deputy Commissioner for Mental Hygiene at the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, Dr. Gary Belkin. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bury. I also want to add my thanks to Commissioner Abiwandenya, and especially Ambassador Otto for your leadership and bringing this to fruition. The last time I was in this building was during the deliberations of the Convention on Disabilities, where one could really not mention mental health or mental illness. The fact that it is now in this part of the SDGs is an opening that we should collectively drive a truck through. The time has come. As Deputy Mayor Bury identified, this was a decision at the highest levels of New York City government to get real about the ways that mental health and mental illness is a driver of so many social outcomes that we care about and so many other health outcomes that we care about. And if we're going to take that in its fullness, in the full reality of how mental health affects so many aspects of our lives, we have to rethink a lot of things that we do. How we do treatment systems, how we engage communities, how we equip government to act across sectors and to lead on this. And so you're going to hear little bits of that, of those things from this panel, but I do encourage you to get the full dose of understanding of Thrive NYC, visit nyc.gov/Thrive NYC, not only to see the breadth of the initiatives, but the logic behind it. There's a strategy behind it. That's starting point is we have to deal with this as it is, one of the leading public health challenges of the 21st century. So it is my pleasure to dive into our panel. It's my pleasure to start with Dr. Malavati, Kishore Malavati, to my left. I'm going to ask them to first introduce themselves and sort of where they're coming from. But Kishore is involved in a big effort to bring a very large health system to act very differently on this issue. And Kishore, in the remarks made, and as you know, a real thrust of Thrive is to try to focus on, as the First Lady said, task shifting, to bring more skills, more action, more ownership of this to the community. And so how is the health system, how can we move the health system to be a partner in that? To not just be the destination where everything happens, waiting for sick people to come, but to really bring its resources and its expertise to help the community be at the forefront of solutions. Just talk.
Just talk. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Kishore Malavade. I'm from Maimonides Medical Center in Brooklyn, and our work currently is helping lead a large network. New York State and the federal government and the city, but especially the state, have been working on redesigning and transforming the healthcare system, in particular the public healthcare system. We had some experience in trying to engage the larger healthcare community, and when I say healthcare community, I really mean the community, in a lot of this work around one particular population that's been addressed here, those with serious mental illness. How can we get them better physical health care? How can we get them better mental health care? How can we coordinate that care? And really look at more functional outcomes that will impact their lives. And I would say one of the early experiences we had in doing that was, in fact, some task shifting towards lay clinical care managers, individuals from the community. They were really community health workers. They were members of the community who could address a lot of the cultural issues that our community faces, but that they could be partners with us. And so it was, in fact, from community-based organizations that we started forming a collaborative to work with all the partners in the community, with the correctional system, with Rikers Island, when they were discharging people back to the community, and to really start to think about individuals in a much more holistic way, and to really think about the community in a way that we could all be partners together. There are just different elements of what we need to do to help individuals out there.
And what do you think are some real obstacles that you're facing in terms of moving this institution, the healthcare system, with its ways and its and workforce challenges and payment challenges in this sort of direction, this task-shifted direction?
We talk a lot about, as a physician, patient engagement, individual engagement. I would say, for all of the larger system issues, it is really about kind of engaging all human beings and providers in particular. My own community of providers have been some of the most difficult to kind of engage in recognizing how we need to work together and differently. One of the biggest challenges is that behavioral health and mental health is not just thought of as health, and that we don't think of it in how it's together and how it needs to be addressed together. We deal with shortages in resources, but again, so do a lot of people, so do a lot of communities. It's not about just more resources, it's how do you deploy those resources more thoughtfully, and recognizing that there are a lot of things that are going on in the community that we're not really connected together around. And so one of the challenges in developing a large system, we're a health system in Brooklyn that covers about 600,000 lives with Medicaid, is how do you start bringing in multiple hospitals, primary care providers, mental health providers, substance providers, social service providers. There are real great opportunities for them to work together in ways that they've never done before. And it was really that kind of collaboration, meeting together, talking together, listening to each other that I think was really critical in getting this started.
Thanks. And Anna, as you know, I'd mentioned in passing that to really live up to mental health in the scope that it challenges us to change and to act, involves changes in government and involving all of government in. This isn't just the health sector's issue. In fact, it's probably primarily other sectors to really take on and re-engineer how they engage this issue and skill up their roles in workforce. So you lead our probation department, which is not the first agency you would think of as part of a mental health solution, but as part of a new planning council that we've set up in New York City that brings about 24 agencies together to try to actually make the new normal, that kind of shared cross-sector ownership. How has this agenda impacted and touched your agency?
So, hello, my name is Ana Bermudez. Buenos días a todos. I lead the Department of Probation, as Gary mentioned, as Dr. Belkin mentioned. And let me just make a distinction here to make sure that everybody's on the same page. So when somebody gets on probation, it's not the same as they went to prison and then they're coming home, okay? This is an actual sentence, so it's an alternative to being incarcerated, essentially. And we work with people in the community. We oversee on any given day, about 25,000 New Yorkers, so it's a lot of people. We have that unfortunate distinction of having way too many people involved in the justice system. And so the justice system has not been a system that promotes good mental health, as you can imagine. And so this whole idea of being at the table, which we were very excited about and felt that it was very important, is trying to combat all sorts of stigma to start with, right? There's the stigma of being involved in the justice system because people assume that you are a dangerous person. Then there's the stigma of, on top of that, if we discover you have a mental health challenge or emotional health or behavioral health, then that becomes a double whammy because that's the second stigma that goes on the system. And so we've had experiences where we couldn't even find a provider for someone, right? Because they're coming from us, so they're dangerous. We don't know how to, deal with that. And then we also had our own probation officers challenged by how to deal with this. So we had to do a lot of not just task shifting, but perspective shifting. Part of the global shifting was probation in general. The stage, we wanted to make probation a stage of opportunity and to focus on well-being outcomes, not just arrest outcomes or criminal justice outcomes. And so in doing that, then we had to go to a lot of training, obviously, of our officers to shift that mindset. And then we needed to train them specifically in the mental health, with the mental health component, and sort of shift the thought that, or the self-perspective that you can be therapeutic without needing to be clinical. Right? And so that, as Deputy Mayor Bury noted and First Lady noted, that quote unquote regular people can have an impact, right? So that was one piece of it. The other piece of it was that too often we equate having a mental health diagnosis with being violent, with being, that predicts criminality in some way. And that is the farthest thing from the truth. It is what we call a responsivity issue, meaning that if we're working with you and you have a mental health issue, then that's part of, any intervention we have needs to deal with that issue, right? It cannot be divorced from that, but it's not automatically a predictor of criminality. And so those were some of the initial changes we had to do with our staff. Then we also had to, as part of Thrive New York City, which has been a great impact, there's a twofold impact. We got funding to start a behavioral health unit within our department, which has been fantastic. Dr. Claire Greenford is here from our agency. That had its own also challenges because, even though it was something that people were clamoring for, to have an actual clinician in our offices, not to do direct services, but to help, the probation officers figure out what was really significant, what could be handled non-clinically within the probation officer's interactions with the person, to get more resources, et cetera. The probation officers were not used to that, even though they had clamored for it, so that's been a challenge to make sure that it's becomes part and parcel of what we do. And as part of this unit and the fact that we also have a training unit, we've been able to train almost 200 of our staff in mental health first aid, which also adds to this, ability to change shift. Last but not least for now, because I'll let other people talk too, is that we have one of the trainings we've done for our staff is actually very connected to the mental health, system, the mental health approach of paying particular attention to the stages of change in someone and using motivational interviewing in your establishing relationships with the people that you work with. And that's been critical to then really figure out how to work with someone effectively, because the consequences of not working with someone effectively can lead to loss of liberty. And we can't afford that. We cannot have people in the system who don't really need to be there because we can't manage something. And so that's a very important part of the work that we're doing, and I'm going to recruit providers here to make sure that we have a direct access to people who need it the most in terms of who have a persistent mental illness. So I'll leave it at that for now. But
so you're getting just this, again, a small taste, though, of how, in the sum total of all this stuff that we're putting out there through Thrive, how the healthcare system has an opening, and I think an excitement, a thirst to change, to be a better partner in some of these kinds of public health solutions and other city agencies. But the action that we're all pointing to is how do we change and bring in and really rely on the resources of our communities. And Sydney Hankerson, to my right, has been doing some really wonderful things around that, particularly around recruiting clergy to be a mental health resource, to be a skilled, supported front line within social networks that really are the basis, are the safety net around this issue. So I was wondering, Sydney, if you could talk a bit about your particular work, but also kind of generalize how from that you really see the potential of communities, if government is a good partner and the healthcare system is a good partner, what they can take on.
Absolutely. So first, I'd like to say thank you, Dr. Belkin, for that warm introduction. I'd like to give you all some statistics to perhaps set the context for why the role of communities and faith-based organizations in particular is so vital in this effort as we address mental health. So the World Health Organization recently released data to show that major depression is the #1 cause of disability in the world. So more people are suffering in your communities from depression and losing time from work than any other medical illness. And we know in the United States that more people are first likely to seek help for an emotional problem from a faith leader, whether it's a pastor, an imam, a rabbi, or a monk at their temple or house of worship, than they are to seek care from medical doctors or psychiatrists such as myself. So clergy truly are frontline leaders in our fight to reduce the stigma and provide care for people with mental health problems. So we've been fortunate to partner with the Department of Health to work with faith leaders throughout New York City to disseminate an intervention called Mental Health First Aid. And this intervention was originally established in Australia, and it equips people, faith leaders, people in the community with the skills to be able to identify people who are at risk for depression, give them support, and then utilize resources in their community to give them the support that they need to help them overcome their illness. And we've been very fortunate to form very strong relationships with faith leaders throughout the city. And I think the lesson to be learned for you and your communities is to assess the needs of specific communities and to identify leaders who can support you in these efforts. Because truly the best interventions sometimes come from the communities instead of from medical practitioners. And using government as a partner to build and enhance those cultural strengths that are already embedded within the community.
Thanks. And finally, Anna, the First Lady mentioned Connections to Care, which is one of our initiatives. And so Connections to Care is a substantial seed fund, over $30 million over 5 years, to try to do what we want to connect this end of the table to this end of the table. That is, to bring behavioral health partners to work with community-based organizations, not as a good referral source, although that's good, but to actually assume a new role as a coach, a partner, a capacity builder to community-based organizations that may have previously had nothing to do with delivering health services, but see mental health in front of them all the time. Daycare centers, job training programs, et cetera. And so you are with the Red Hook Initiative, which was a recipient of one of those grants. So I'd love to hear from you how that is challenging and giving opportunity to your organization and your community to own this issue.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. The Red Hook Initiative has been a source of hope and inspiration for 15 years in the Red Hook community. And so when we had the opportunity to participate in Connections to Care, it felt like this incredible buoy. It really felt like we were given a raft in a climate where young people are more likely to experience symptoms of mental health challenges, but least likely to access those resources, and also have had experiences of systemic violence within institutions. So don't have trust at times in those institutions and feel often isolated or alienated when they work with institutions that aren't aware of culturally responsive practices. So for us, partnering with NYU Lutheran, who has a commitment to culturally responsive practice, was so exciting for us to be able to have a space where young people, where our staff members are able to gain the capacity, like you mentioned, and being able to provide mental health services on site, as well as really, I think, making sure that we are making mental health common. And we're also understanding what is common about mental health from our young people. So when they are able to talk to us, we're able to make the translation between, for example, mental health first aid, and think about, how would you say this to a 14-year-old? How would you say this to a 16-year-old? How would you say this to a 23-year-old? How are they saying it back to you? So being able to be a translator, to be able to be a listener, has really supported us with making the connections that our young people need to access resources and also become resources, and honoring and validating how they've survived so far. You know, when they are most likely exposed to systemic violence or interpersonal violence and trauma. And so that they're able to then know that they can be a peer educator, someone who can be a resource, because young people are more likely to listen to credible messengers. So listen to a peer. And our mental health partner is also supporting us with learning psychoeducation tools that we can then use to support our young people as they are our ambassadors.
So we focused especially on how some institutions are moving towards owning this issue, on ways to engage community. I hope you're getting a flavor of, this is not the way we talked about doing mental health when I was trained, or how I still think most of my colleagues are being trained, or what people outside of health policy have heard or are saying about how mental health needs to and is weaving into the work they do, and for them to be successful. A lot more to say about Thrive NYC. I urge you to learn about it. We'll be here for discussion. We're going to open up the room for discussion in a moment. But we are going to hear from some other folks in the room who've really been strong advocates within the UN system for this work. And before I turn to them, I just want to reinforce the value of having this meeting here now. Some of these key ideas, cross-sector governance, task shifting, community-driven priority setting, and ownership. I learned these as how they can work for mental health by working in sub-Saharan Africa, by working in Haiti, with working with groups like Partners in Health, Millennium Villages Project. This is a north-south conversation that everyone can understand and that everyone can learn from and teach each other on these core, innovative, new directions and new concepts to be the new blueprint for how to think about public mental health. The UN is a particularly important place, and the UN community is a particularly important place to mediate and to have and to grow and to nurture that kind of dialogue, because to use these methods to scale, to make these the new normal, to take mental health on in its fullness, in its social fullness, as part of social health, we'll need globally scaled laboratory and learning and government engagement. And that's up to us and the people you work for and the people you connect with. And so some of those people and those countries and organizations that have really stepped up on this issue, we're going to turn to for some comments and then open the room for questions. But we're going to hear from representatives of Canada, Costa Rica, Belgium, Chile, and the World Health Organization.
Thank you very much, Dr. Belkin. Let me first thank Caleb for your leadership in pushing and pulling us along on this important issue over the last few years. The City of New York, the Mayor's Office, Deputy Mayor, it's really great to see this kind of leadership. You know, here at the UN, I don't think we take advantage of the fact that we're living in New York enough, because many of the issues we deal with, and your program on the SDGs is very impressive, but this should be a good example of how we can take advantage of discussing some of the issues that we deal with. I think this session has been really important because it's really dealt with us from the two different levels. One, we are still at the point of ensuring mental health is talked about the way it needs to be, and this requires leadership, and we've seen it here today. In Canada, it's become a real priority of our Prime Minister, who is trying to put the right amount of attention on mental health. It's an issue that we deal with on a daily basis across the country. The statistics that I was given says that 1 in 3 Canadian citizens will deal with mental health in their lifetime. We see tragic circumstances in our Indigenous communities, in our military community. So, and another stat that someone gave me is mental health directly and indirectly costs the Canadian economy $50 billion a year. That's a staggering amount. And I just wanted to mention today, actually, is an important day. A Canadian company, Bell Telecom, it's our largest telecom company. They've had a program for a number of years called Bell Let's Talk. And they donate, for everyone that tweets that hashtag, Bell Let's Talk, they donate 5 cents to mental health programs. But more importantly, it really gets the conversation going. So check your Twitter and please tweet on that today. I wanted to ask a question. I'm not sure to whom, so Dr. Belkin, I'll leave it to you to direct, but we've heard a lot of, and that's the other thing we've heard today, a lot of practical programs of how do we go from just the dialogue to practicalities. What I want to ask is about measurement. How, and speaking specifically of Thrive NYC, how are you looking at measuring the effectiveness of your programs? Thank you.
My understanding of the protocol is we're going to go through all the speakers, and then I'm somehow synthesizing the questions and answers.
Thank you so much, and thank you to the New York City Mayor's Office of International Affairs, and to the First Lady, and to all for organizing this event on social relevant issue. It is striking how many people in the world have to cope with mental illnesses, and how little we talk openly about it, and how little we debate and we bring the issue and help to lower the stigma that exists around it. I come from a country that nevertheless being said is one of the happiest countries in the world, it has absolutely a lot of issues and a lot of challenges in terms of mental health that need to be addressed. And we are very happy to be here and to learn from your experiences to addressing these issues in a city as complex as New York City is. We want to thank the First Lady McGrath for having introduced us to the Global Vision and Urban Action Agenda, which, after hearing all of the panelists, has proven to be much needed in this moment. And I would like to ask, I had the opportunity to talk a little bit before the event with Ana Bermudez about the programs that they've been following with the population that is using alternative sentences. And I heard the data before about 40% of the population having different mental health issues, and that's quite understandable. And then the alternatives and the increase of the using alternative sentences and providing a better environment for reinserting people into society, I think is very useful. And I was telling her about, well, how we in Costa Rica are moving from this paradigm of having a lot of people, a big population in our prisons, and trying to institutionalize them and to provide other alternatives and to provide mental health in both situations. I was wondering if you have some comparisons between the people that are in prison and the people that are outside the prisons but are doing alternate sentences, and how do the numbers compare in one option or the other, and if the programs outside, if you could go and explain a little bit more. You mentioned already some of them, but I would like to hear more about it. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much. We really would like to thank the First Lady of New York City, and then the New York's Major Office for International Affairs, and also Dr. Kelly Voto for his leadership. And I really appreciate this book. I think it's fantastic. It should be done in every city. It's a good example of how we can work out things. In Chile, we believe that mental health is an integral and central element for the full realization of the right to health. There is no health without mental health. We strongly endorse to view persons with mental disabilities as legal subjects in society and equal human rights holders also, guaranteed with the exercise and respect of all fundamental rights, whether civil, economic, social, or cultural. With this, we seek to acknowledge and restore their rights of equality, non-discrimination, humane and dignified treatment, access to social goods and services, citizenship, and social inclusion. In this context, since 2000, Chile has a national plan for mental health, which establishes a model for mental health assistance in the public sector with specific resolutions, prevention policies, and ambulatory care for people with mental problems from a human rights approach. To finish, I would like to pose a question to the panelists. How do you have information, or how you see how governments are dealing with mental health from a human rights approach? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We also from Belgium would like to thank the First Lady and New York City for organizing this very special for us and very important event. and the permanent representative of Palau for introducing and this wonderful booklet. From Belgian side, I would like to elaborate in a few minutes on the topic, on the approach of community-based healthcare, because our Ministry of Health last year introduced this approach in Belgium, and it has three objectives. The first one is provision of mental health care at the residence of the patient, so he or she can remain in her living or his living condition. Reduction, of course, of mental health care in clinics, and focus on early detection of psychiatric disorders. And for the implementation of this community-based mental health care, the general, but also the psychiatric hospitals, of course, they can use part of their budget to create health networks in the local communities. And this is then part of the first-line health care. The functions of these networks are the following: prevention and promotion of mental health care, early detection, screening, and diagnosis; ambulant teams for intensive care, both acute and chronic; teams for rehabilitation, recovery, and social inclusion. They also have units, of course, for intensive treatment, both acute and chronic, when hospitalization is necessary. And the fifth function is to create special residences for mental health care delivery when the patient's own residence or social environment is unsuitable. So these 5 functions are interconnected in a specific network where for each patient there is a reference staff designated. And this staff is responsible for positive outcome for the patient. Specific guidelines have been developed, and this is now done with the people from 16 to 65 years of age. Depending on the outcome of this 3-year pilot period, government will see if it would be necessary and possible to extend this to children and also older people. So in the light of this experiment that we are starting in Belgium, I would like to question the panelists if you have lessons learned here in New York City on community-based mental health care. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There have been several references to the data which WHO has published, but I wanted to also mention that in 2013, 194 countries adopted the Global Mental Health Action Plan in Geneva, which is our roadmap for dealing with mental health at international, national, and actually at local levels too. And this vision, which is contained in the Global Action Plan, is very much in line with what Thrive NYC is all about. And let me also join others that have congratulated the city for this fantastic initiative. It's really key, I think, as many people have mentioned, that there is a need to integrate mental health care across sectors, but it is often overlooked that it should also be integrated within the health system. And often we find that that is not seen in the context of promotion, prevention, and treatment, a holistic approach. It's very important, as many people have also said, to involve all stakeholders and all communities, but particularly also the private sector. It is not only government that should be responsible and involved. I wanted to do a short promo for our World Health Day, which is commemorated each year on April 7th, and the theme this year is depression. And we will host an event here, if not in this room, the one across the passage, and involve hopefully all of you that are here today, as well as senior UN leadership and member states. So you are all welcome. Depression obviously is an important aspect of this work. It affects particularly adolescents disproportionately, women of childbearing age, and people older than 60. So it is not only overlooked, but something that needs much more serious attention, particularly at community level. And that brings me to something I wanted to ask. You have mentioned, all of you, how communities are approached to combat stigma. But I wondered if you could reflect a bit more on how you use community outreach to ensure greater access to services. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments and those questions. Mindful of the time, we will try to treat them as quickly as we can, but we'd also hope to open questions to the room, which we may have less time for, but why don't we go through these, and thank you all again for your interest. The first question on measurement and data, I'll take a stab at that. If you had an hour, maybe we could talk about this at length. But the answer I'll focus in my answer on, as with many things with Thrive, the measurement challenge has forced us to rethink how we do things. So to rethink how we measure, what tools we have. We've relied on surveys and methods that tell us things a year too late with a precision that doesn't tell us how to act. And so we're learning we need to create new ways of measuring if we want to have a community health strategy. Other areas of health can, with some precision, say who's affected, when, watch the spread of something in a community, et cetera. And we need, if we're going to have a community strategy, we need more nimble measures. So we are creating new structures. We created something called a Mental Health Innovation Lab, partnering with our city university. We've created a cross-agency mayoral really task force to look at how to think comprehensively about measuring Thrive, both specific initiatives, and how do we get a sense of its overall impact. If you put in this huge investment, how do we get a sense of what we've done more globally? So it's a great question, and I think we're challenging how we've been measuring in the field of mental health. The next question from the representative of Costa Rica on alternative sentencing. What has our experience been about the efficacy of that? Anna, I figured maybe you can speak to.
Sure. I mean, I'd be happy to discuss this in terms of more global as opposed to the mental health piece. So I'm going to keep it to the mental health piece about it. And I wish I had an answer for you as to the comparison of people who are incarcerated versus the people who are in the community. Anecdotally, I can tell you that people in the community do a lot better because we can stay with them throughout and really work with them to connect them to the right places and the right people, establish relationships with them, and really not create a revolving door for them. The people who are in prison or in local detention, I know we struggle a lot with discharge planning and there are mandates in the city. There was a lawsuit in the city called Brad H. that everybody who is diagnosed with a severe mental illness in Rikers Island has to have a particular discharge plan. We struggle with that, quite frankly. We have not hit the sweet spot there quite yet, but we're working on it. And so it's very difficult to, and it's difficult to do. So you know, in terms of the prison situation, also it exacerbates a lot of the mental health issues that people have. So we do know that becomes even more of a challenge. That's why we want to keep people in the community, and not just in the community vis-a-vis probation, but in the community, in their own communities, getting the services that they need. Other initiatives, like I said before, we've trained our staff in mental health first aid. We have our behavioral health unit has instituted a couple of risk assessments that are specific to behavioral health and substance misuse that has helped our probation officers then figure out what roadmap to use, like how to serve the person, given all the other risk factors that they might have. Those have been very important. As I mentioned to you, the use of restorative justice principles in our work has been also very important. It keeps the humanity of the person, separates what they do from who they are, and we're really, really embedding a culture of non-judgmentalism, if you will, in our officers. That's been also a critical component of the work that we're doing in trying to change culture. But I'd be happy to have a further conversation of that.
And this is a huge global conversation, how criminal justice and mental health can align, how we can move from punishment to public health globally. The next question was about what are our lessons learned about community-based mental health care. Again, a not tiny topic. I'll make a few comments and maybe Kishore or anyone can jump in. But I would say at a high level, what I think we're challenging with Thrive is making community-based mental health care be less about the four walls of the mental health provider and capacity, and more centered on the community. And how the provider is redesigned to be much more accessible, but also much more of a partner to that community in terms of, we talked about task shifting and skill building, but also as a partner to users to help not just treat illness, but promote mental health, to be a source of ways people can find their way to resilience and self-care skills and so forth. There's a lot of efforts, not just through Thrive, but other efforts nationally and statewide too, that are kind of aligning to try to make more behavioral health care happen in primary care. That I think is also a global conversation. I don't know, Kishore or others wanted to add impressions to that.
Yeah, I would add, and it connects to, I think, some of the questions around integration and mental health as a human right in some ways. I mean, I would say a lot of our work is focused on building up a strong foundation to the healthcare system that recognizes the value of mental health issues and the critical role they play in the health and functional status of individuals' lives. So it is, in fact, trying to shift from community mental health, I think of as a psychiatrist as we are specialists for those with the most complex, difficult, challenging needs. We need to have very specialized solutions for those individuals that nonetheless connect to the larger system. But we need to really empower the primary care and healthcare world to be thinking about that, to understand those issues, and to integrate mental health specialists into that world to address issues where an individual feels they want to get care. If they are going within the provider world, seeing your provider, your primary care doctor, your OBGYN, that we can address your mental health issues in that location, not have to send you somewhere else.
And we've used government to convene and try to nudge systems like Kishore's to move in those directions. But we've also, and I think either the Deputy Mayor or the First Lady mentioned something called the Mental Health Service Corps, which was one of the Thrive initiatives, which is taking it on our own to be impatient and place clinicians in high-need neighborhoods and settings, mostly in primary care, to try to be the leading edge and push the change we want to see. And show that the laws of physics allow doing things differently, and hopefully bring others along in those directions. The following question was around the interplays between human rights and the work we're doing, which I think is such a key question. And turn to this end of the table, perhaps, for your thoughts on the work you do, very much closer to the ground, about how those things, you're seeing those things connect.
I think for us, we think often about who has value, what has value, and who has influence. So again, thinking about the power of peer education and thinking about starting from very young with messaging about the commonality of mental health and social and emotional health. So thinking about how it is integrated into our everyday work. So thinking about these practices not as separate and distinct from earning a high school diploma or a high school equivalency diploma, thinking of it as integral to our support with job search, or the work with our young adults and the work that they're doing to bridge the digital divide with Wi-Fi in the community, connecting that to mental health and well-being. So thinking about how we are addressing common needs and making that the draw. I was speaking with someone earlier, and I was asked, how do you get young people in so that they can get access to mental health care? And for us, we as a community center, as a community-based organization, we open the doors wide and we meet young people where they're at, and we integrate mental health care within those processes of the organization.
Sure. I think to build on what Enes just stated, I think that looking at this as a human rights issue, we really are thinking about how can we change the culture about mental health across the lifespan. So one thing that we're partnering with communities is to train teachers at schools how to identify the signs and symptoms of emotional problems in children, to work with family members. And our work with churches, probably our biggest success of our partnership is that one of the churches that we're working with in Harlem, First Corinthian Baptist Church, actually just opened a public free mental health clinic. So they're going to be providing services at a site adjacent to the church for people who are members of the church and the broader community to receive services. And we're looking to partner with the Department of Health and other agencies to see how we can replicate that model at other houses of worship to provide increased access for people who otherwise wouldn't get it.
And then the last question we heard about bringing the community around the issue of stigma. And first, I also just want to give our appreciation to the World Health Organization. Dr. Saxena, the director of the Department of Mental Health and Substance Use, has been a thought partner as we developed Thrive and was a supporter and a present at our launching of a Cities Thrive coalition, bringing U.S. cities together to follow through on a lot of the principles that we're enunciating here and see cities as the change agents that we think they can be on this issue. So thank you to WHO. So I'll open up to anyone on the panel who wants to speak to that issue, because I think you each bump up against stigma and how to bring others in as partners to take that on in the places you reach. So if any of you would like to speak to that question, I invite you to.
Sure. I think in terms of stigma, research shows that the most effective way to reduce stigma is to have contact with someone who has had a mental health problem and then has had a positive experience with treatment. I think the illustrations that we had today from the commissioner and from the First Lady about sharing their story publicly about their personal and familial experiences with mental health problems is a very powerful way to reduce stigma. All of us here have unique cultures, and culture uniquely impacts mental health problems, unlike any other medical condition. And how we integrate the cultural aspects within our own personal story and sharing that, I think, is one of the best ways that we can reduce stigma.
I have a burning question I need to ask you, please.
Okay.
I've been caregivers to many of my siblings who are mentally ill. Of many of my sisters who are mentally ill. Many of them do not get access, do not want to go to care, do not want to reach for help, and the burdens falls on the family, the parents, usually the parents. And I would like to know what is New York City or Thrive New York City, or is there such any program that can help family members, caregivers, because you cannot leave them out, because they're the ones who are in contact with these people 24 hours.
Thank you for the question. I'll see if others want to speak about a lot of things we're doing to think both in our healthcare system and other systems to see families as a real partner in care. I'll just speak for Thrive specifically. There are a bunch of ways we're trying to really help the families out there that are trying to help their loved ones. One thing is, which you may have seen if you move around the city, being advertised as something called NYC Well, which is a 24/7 phone service to enable people people to help navigate the system, to find help that they might need, the supports that they might need, and those could be family members calling on behalf of someone else, or for themselves, for respite, for other resources that they can lean on to be effective. But this is a huge issue, and we're seeing some changes in our healthcare system in terms of reimbursing some of these sorts of what have been called home and community-based services that can provide some more of these supports so that families aren't alone in taking on this issue.
We have had a very full session today. The good news is that it's not going to end here. First of all, I want to thank everyone for having joined us today, in particular our partners and co-sponsors that brought us here to the United Nations. But I really am excited about our next steps. With Gary's team at DOHMH and the Mayor's Office for International Affairs, we are excited to invite the diplomatic community to get certified in mental health first aid. So through this public education program, New York City is teaching our residents the skills needed to identify, understand, and respond to signs of mental illness. In the coming weeks, my office will be sending an invitation and a link to register for this mental health first aid training. Gary, thank you so much for you and your team for providing this opportunity. We are also interested in inviting our diplomatic and consular community. We have quite a few consuls general who have joined us here today at the UN, who are important touch points to our immigrant communities here in New York City. And if anybody is interested in hosting a mental health first aid training at their missions or at their consulates, we would be delighted to provide trainers to do so. There will be a follow-up email that will also include the video that we weren't able to share earlier today. Thank you again so much for coming. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.